Hi class, and welcome to this video in VCE Year 12 Economics, which is going to focus on Unit 3 Outcome 1 topic of relative prices and how relative prices impact the allocation of resources and impact our living standards. I hope by the end of this video you understand this concept. What do we mean by relative prices? And how do relative prices, as I mentioned, impact the allocation of resources, and how this impacts living standards and what we mean by living standards, and in particular, material and non-material living standards. This is key knowledge point 8 of our Unit 3 Outcome 1 study design. So we're starting to get into the middle of the study design, and it's going to assume that you have an understanding of the key knowledge points above, such as supply and demand curve and equilibrium prices. So what do I mean by relative prices, and why is it relevant to economics? We know that economics is the study of how different societies organize themselves to maximize the needs and wants of their citizens when we have scarce resources. And that's really important because of this issue of relative scarcity. We have unlimited needs and wants and limited resources. So we need to come up with effective choices to organize our economy and allocate our resources, which are land, labor, and capital. And to effectively do this, we need to take into account relative standards. And if we effectively make good decisions, ultimately it's going to improve our living standards, is essentially the hypothesis of this video. So what do I mean by resource allocation and relative prices? Resource allocation is how the study that economists do on how resources, land, capital, and labor, are used to produce goods and services to satisfy the needs and wants. If we efficiently allocate our resources, we theoretically will satisfy the needs and wants of our economy. Now, markets and equilibrium prices and supply and demand curves are able to reveal information about how we do effective resource allocation and information about consumer preferences. We understand this because of supply and demand curves, and also just practically, markets tell us what consumers are exchanging their income for. What goods and services are they purchasing? Now, relative price is a new concept, refers to the price of one good measured in the terms of the price of another good, because we have options about what we're going to purchase. So for example, if product X was $10, and product Y is $5, we would say the relative price is 10 to $5 or 2 to 1. Or simply, product X is twice the amount of product Y. Now, if the price of product X rose to $15, we would have product X costing 15 and product Y costing us 5. So the relative price change would have changed. It would now be 3 to 1, or product X is 3 times more expensive than product Y. So what would be the impact of this price change on consumers and suppliers? Well, it probably logically suggests that suppliers would like to produce more product X because the price has gone up. But consumers would go, well, product X is getting too expensive for me, I will purchase more product Y. So relative prices and the price mechanism are important concepts. We know that relative price is the price of one good measured in terms of the price of another good. And the price of goods and services are influenced by supply and demand. And this is an important component of resource allocation. This is our price mechanism. The price, supply and demand determines how much is supplied and how much is demanded. Because the price mechanism describes how the forces of demand and supply determine the price of goods and services. Now, importantly and perhaps new, it is the prices of these goods and services which ultimately determines how our resources are going to be allocated. If there is more demanded, there will be more supplied, hopefully, because price will go up, and hence we will allocate more of our resources to this. So we can start to understand that the changes in relative prices cause a change in the way we will allocate our resources. So a key element of thinking about price mechanism is how is this going to impact the use of our scarce resources? For example, and examples are always a good way to try and understand economics. An increase in demand for bicycles would increase the price of bicycles. So if demand goes up, price will go up of bicycles. Producers, so suppliers, will take advantage of the additional profit they can make and allocate more resources to it, and supply will go up. So by the demand of bicycles going up, increasing the profit, increasing the price, there will be an allocation of more resources to the production of bicycles. We'll be allocating more land or natural resources, more labour, and more capital resources in our economy to produce bicycles, potentially at the expense of other products. And how does this impact what we know as living standards? And what are living standards? Living standards are what we consider how we are going to measure the quality of life. And it might almost be an indication of how happy our society is. Now, we break down living standards, and we will talk more about this in outcome 2, into material living standards and non-material. Material living standards are things that we can hold, is the way that I understand it. And what are the things that we can really tangibly understand? It looks at the ability of a household to purchase goods and services. How many goods and services can households purchase? It relates to the quantity and the variety that they can afford and gives us an understanding of their purchasing power. In outcome 2, we recognise that real GDP is a really good measure, but simply understanding that if we have a greater ability to purchase goods and services, it's likely that our material living standards will go up. The more income, the more ability to produce goods and services, for example, TVs, things that we enjoy, will allow us to have a greater material living standard, a greater quality of life. Now, we understand, hopefully, that just having lots of stuff, goods and services doesn't necessarily make you, as a society or an individual, happy or having a good quality of life. So we recognise there are not a lot of non-material living standards that are important. These are the standards which are intangible, we can't touch, and are difficult to measure, but really influence how happy we are. These include things like safety, political stability, social interaction, the feelings of fulfillment that we have, and lots of other things. Are we in love? Those sorts of things. So understanding that we measure a quality of life by how much material things we can have, material living standards, how many goods and services we can purchase, and non-material living standards, or the things that are intangible, that build up, help our happiness, is an important thing to understand. But what the hell does that have to do with relative prices? Living standards are a measure of our life, quality of life. The price market mechanism has been adopted to allocate scarce resources. We will use the supply and demand curves to determine what is going to be produced and allocate our resources. Now, it's been argued that the price market mechanism, supply and demand curves, are the most effective and efficient way of boosting living standards, especially material ones. the ability to get goods and services. How does that work? For example, if there is an increase in demand for chocolate, this will shift our demand curve to the right, resulting in an increase in the relative price. This will give an incentives for suppliers to expand them. So we're going to go from S to S1 and D to D1. This will result in a new equilibrium price, which will result in more of that product being produced. As you can see, our quantity has gone from Q1 to Q2. The price has also gone up. Ultimately, this price mechanism, understanding and allocating our resources as a result of supply and demand curves, has led to more production, more consumption, and this has maximized our satisfaction and living standards because more people can purchase goods, chocolate, because we are producing more of it. We've allocated our resources more effectively to meet our living standards because we have taken into account the market mechanism and supply and demand curves. If this didn't occur, and we didn't consider production using market mechanisms, this would result in the demand for chocolate not being met, and most importantly, our material living standards not being met as effectively. So how would this look on a demand curve? I've hopefully given a very quick and messy example over there, but you might want to consider that into your summary notes. Now, is this a perfect argument? There is an argument that the price mechanism maximizes efficiency, and that means that things are produced at the lowest possible price, leading to the maximization of material living standards. There is a counter argument for this, that relative prices and price mechanisms, economics, the perfect market, do not maximize living standards, and they in particular don't maximize non-material living standards, don't maximize that intangible happiness we're striving for. Why is this? Because it often leads to the allocation of scarce resources inequitably. Not everyone gets the chance to benefit. What does this mean? Examples include those whose skills are in short supply relative to demand will get high wages and improve their living standards, but that's going to be inequitable because people with occupations with less demand will not have higher wages. They will not get the benefit. We also understand that there is an inequality of income distribution in our economies, and this leads to deterioration of non-living living standards like social unrest, crime, and mental health problems. This way of working out wages and income using the market leads to inequality. Inequality in of itself creates issues like unrest and crime. An economy that is trying its best to reduce costs, because remember suppliers are trying to reduce costs, might increase unemployment, which will impact your living standards. And importantly, in this strive to reduce costs, those that are employed might be able to buy lots of material things, but they must keep proving their worth to their employer, so working harder, creating more stress, deteriorating their mental health, reducing their non-material living standards. So it's recognizing that this does potentially maximize how many goods and services people can buy, but there is some issues around inequality and whether the capitalist perfect market price mechanism concept actually maximizes your non-material happiness. So let's recap. I hope that this is quite a little but complicated topic, that we now understand the concept of relative prices, how we can start to allocate resources as a result, and we've been introduced to the concept of living standards. And I hope that has built on your understanding of microeconomics.